Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got my fantasy football week 3 running back rankings here. My top 24 players at the position, so RB1s and 2s for this week's games in those 12-team fantasy leagues here. If you'd like access to the rest of my weekly positional rankings, those can be found by clicking the link in the description of today's video to SFS Gold, which is the exclusive membership package here on the channel. For just over $1 a week, you'll get access to quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses, with all of those players being stacked up against one another and their matchups, having talent taken into consideration here, health, injury, risk, reward. All that stuff plays into how I build those ranking sheets. We've got top 48 running backs and wide receivers, and then top 32 for all of the other major fantasy football positions. We've also posted our top 24 wide receivers as a little bit of a sampler for you today as well, so go check out that video. But with that being said, let's hit that intro and get straight in to today's episode. Alrighty, we are going in ascending order for today's episode here. So starting with my RB1 overall here for week 3. Who else? It's Christian McCaffrey. He's already proved back this season that if he's healthy, he's a top fantasy running back option out there. No one has better utilization and better usage in his offense. He catches so many passes. He runs the ball so many times per game. His volume is ridiculous. It's off the charts. He's probably the best prototype player in terms of a rusher receiver combination that can just net us massive point outputs in PPR formats, with even not scoring a touchdown potentially in a weekly matchup. So there's everything to like here about Christian McCaffrey. Again, he did leave that matchup last week, but ultimately returned with a minor injury. So again, when he's out there on the field, this is the best player in fantasy football. It is certainly a privilege to have him in your lineups. Before I get into my number 2 overall running back for week 3 fantasy football action, I want to take a second to talk to you all about my favorite way to increase my profitability in odds when I'm betting on sports this NFL season. OddsJam is a website that compares sports betting odds from over 30 top sportsbooks and helps you find the best value regardless of which side of the line you're betting on. By heading over to the odds drop-down menu and selecting the sport of your choosing, in our case football, we can check out all of the most relevant upcoming performances for professional or even collegiate athletics. Here we'll go with Thursday Night Football's matchup between the Houston Texans and Carolina Panthers, and when we click on that game, all of the different game modes and options that we have to choose from and that OddsJam has the odds and lines from will be popped up on your screen and displayed here, and you simply click to select which game mode you would like to see. So for example, let's head over to the Moneyline section and check out the top sports books for this game. So if you wanted to bet the money line, the straight winner of this game between the Carolina Panthers and Houston Texans, and you wanted to take the Panthers, minus 375 odds on Barstool is highlighted in yellow and pointed out to you by OddsJam as the best return for any money you're going to spend on that game. Additionally, we see some other sports books down here, Unibet, Sugar House, among others, that have that same line for you to take advantage of. And if you want to go with the Texans, a risky move, but something you could certainly do if you want to pick an upset and get a really nice return here, they've got you. OddsJam's best odds at plus 332 odds for this game. OddsJam also offers the excellent feature for its members of daily arbitrage bets, which is essentially risk-free betting here. So you'll see the Detroit Lions versus Baltimore Ravens matchup. If you were to bet the total points, the over and the under, OddsJam provides you with the sports books that you should place an even bet on for each side of this potential game that you're going to be playing here. So one of these bets is going to win, the other of them is going to lose, but the net that you will receive from that winning game will net you a return listed over here in the percentages category. And obviously for free members, they're going to be a little bit lower of offers, but if you get yourself their exclusive packages and upgrade your membership status, They will improve their arbitrage bet percentage outputs and share with you more advantageous and potentially profitable games for you. Sign up for your free OddsJam account today by heading to the top link in the description of today's video. Additionally, I've also posted their Twitter account in there as well, so if you'd like additional information on them, go check that out. All right, here we go, jumping back into things, but one more time, OddsJam, go check it out, everybody. The link is the top posted one in the description of today's video. Dalvin Cook, though, my number 2 running back against the Seattle Seahawks here this week. Dalvin's right up there with Christian McCaffrey in terms of being the most consistent running back in fantasy football this season. He's dinged up. He has a minor ankle sprain, but Coach Mike Zimmer says he's a tough cookie. He's coming back out here this week, and unless he absolutely can't play, Dalvin Cook is the motor of this offense and what makes this team run. He'll be available unless he absolutely can't go. Against the Seahawks defense, not too much concern for me here. I think he'll come out, have a strong performance, and as long as he gets the typical volume we see from him, Dalvin Cook will remain a top-end option. He was able to come back with that sprained ankle and produce some pretty good numbers. We'll see, though. He was already warmed up. He was already loosened up in that performance when he returned from that injury, and he still looked dang good. So we'll see here when he has to start from obviously not being in a game situation to warming back up, if he can maintain that top-end level of play, but I think that Dalvin should be able to do so here. Derrick Henry against the Indianapolis Colts. He went nuts last week. I mean, what was he? Him and Aaron Jones had ridiculous touchdown performances and put up some monster fantasy point totals for us. Henry's going to do the same thing here again this week. Now, I shouldn't say the same thing because he's not going to have like 40-plus fantasy points, but I do expect him to come out here in a division matchup, potentially against a Colts team without Carson Wentz, which could play into the favor of the Titans and help them be a more favored team here in this matchup if they have to start Jacob Eason or go a different route there. But that's not what I'm anticipating here. I think that Carson Wentz, we still have to hear some news on that and obviously figure out whether or not he's going to be active. But I'm going to assume that's the case here for how I'm projecting Derrick Henry, and I'm not going to factor that into his assessment. But the volume, the goal line upside, just the pure talent and what he can do as a pure rushing threat, it's too good to pass on here. Number 3 position for Derrick Henry, always in for a strong week. Alvin Kamara, off his meltdown performance last week, at number 4 against the Patriots. Not a matchup I love, not a matchup I hate. I think that the Pats will try and take Alvin Kamara away, but I think he's too dynamic and too versatile to be taken away here. I think that this team is going to try and put the ball in the hands of Jameis Winston and force him to pass the football downfield. But I think that Sean Payton's pretty crafty. He's pretty creative. He's going to find ways around that and ways to get his star playmaker the football and make sure that he doesn't have as down of a performance as he did last week. Jonathan Taylor on the other side of that Derrick Henry matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. Excuse me. So the Jonathan Taylor will be playing the Tennessee Titans. This is a front that you love to see with a Colts offensive line that's as strong as it is, with Jonathan Taylor being as talented he is and seeing the performances he was able to produce against them last year. JT, do not worry. There was a lot of backs being utilized in the backfield last week. Marlon Mack was out there more than I would have liked to see. Naheem Hines was out there a bit as well. JT's the workhorse for this football team. He saw a lot of the goal line carries, and he actually leads the NFL, I believe, through the first 2 weeks here in goal line touches. Now, he was getting plugged up and destroyed behind the line of scrimmage by Aaron Donald, but who wouldn't be? The Colts offensive line was struggling to hold him here, so there's not a player like that in the Tennessee Titans defensive line. If JT can get through, he'll find his crease. I expect him to find the end zone for the first time this season here in Week 3. Nick Chubb, one of the most consistent fantasy scorers out there. This dude just finds holes. He's got one of the best offensive lines in pro football, and he is an explosive play machine, and he doesn't even catch passes. He comes out here and just has 20-plus yard runs like it's nobody's business. Chicago is no slouch of a defensive front here, but Nick Chubb and that Cleveland offensive line are certainly good enough to push those Bears out of the way and create sufficient run lanes for Nick here. Austin Ekeler, a player I'm higher on than I usually would be here in Week 3. With this matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, I just think that the expected passing format and the expected passing volume in this particular matchup suits Austin Ekeler's play style very well. Justin Herbert isn't necessarily always looking to check the ball down to Ekeler, but that's certainly become a lot larger of a factor in how he plays on a week-to-week basis this season, even as opposed to last season as a rookie. And when Ekeler's healthy, I mean, last year in 2020, he averaged 6.5 targets per game. So you're talking about a running back who sees some of the highest end upside in the receiving game department. Ekeler's going to do great this week. I expect him to come out here and again in a spread out offense this week. It's probably going to be very high scoring against Kansas City. He could be the player that gets out there and makes a little bit of a difference for this Chargers team because he should find some nice opportunities in that passing game. Ezekiel Elliott. Now, a lot of people are concerned. A lot of people are hitting that panic button because of how much volume Tony Pollard saw last week. It was 18 total touches for Zeke to 16 for Pollard. I'm not quite ready to panic yet. Now, Philadelphia isn't a super easy matchup for the Dallas Cowboys, but they've got Zach Martin back. This is an offensive line that is already taking a huge step forward just from that acquisition while also losing Lyle Collins in the same breath because having that extra pulling guard that is such an elite player really opens up things for your offense. So Zeke's going to come out here and get his volume. You're talking about having a second running back in an offense come in and take 16 touches away, and Zeke is still almost at that 20-touch threshold. The Cowboys are doing this for a reason. They want to keep his legs fresh, and they want to keep him running at his best level for the whole 17-game season this year. They don't want him fading out late in the year, losing his legs, becoming tired, worn down, all that bad stuff. Zeke is going to be fresh this year. This almost might play to your benefit on the back stretch of the season because when they're leaning on Zeke late in the year, feeding Zeke down the stretch, he'll be putting up those big workhorse numbers and he'll be healthy for you to be able to still have that production potential. Do not, I repeat, do not panic on Ezekiel Elliott just yet. Chris Carson at number 9 for against the Minnesota Vikings this week. He's been very, very productive here through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. The Vikings are a pretty good matchup for him. That's what actually bumps him up higher than we would typically have him here on the list. The TD upside, the workhorse volume potential. I think this is going to be a really strong offensive performance for the Seattle Seahawks here. Russell Wilson has done his most damage typically in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, and we're still in that category, so I expect maximum upside, maximum potential output for the Seahawks offensive players. This should be a good one. I think that the pass catchers, who we'll get into in a bit here in that wide receivers episode, stay tuned for those players as well. They're going to be very, very key lineup plays this week. David Montgomery against the Browns. So Cleveland is no slouch of a run defensive unit, but the Bears also make a very strong emphasis and a very strong point to run the football a heavy dosage of times with David Montgomery. He is a workhorse running back. Matt Nagy uses him in that style and that fashion. He makes sure he touches the ball enough times in a game to get him those looks and opportunities that he needs to have a very safe fantasy floor. I love that. As long as Justin Fields keeps this team in the game here for his first NFL start, nothing can hold David Montgomery back here from having a potential bust performance, because I think this should be a fairly tight contested game, because while it is Justin Fields' first start, he's also a highly dynamic player who has no NFL game tape on him for a full 60-minute performance. That's going to give the Bears a little bit of mystery, a little bit of upside in terms of how they're going to use this offense here in that first start. Aaron Jones now here at the number 11 spot against the San Francisco 49ers. I am definitely lower on Aaron Jones than consensus for this week. Being a Packer fan, I've seen how this offensive line at full strength has struggled against this 49ers pass rush in front seven. This isn't something I love to see. I don't get David Bakhtiari this week. Elton Jenkins, our star inside, our interior guard, is questionable. He's banged up with an injury. If we're without him, that is bad news. Our running back is very dependent on his offensive line, no matter how talented he is. If you're without arguably your two best offensive linemen, that is a big deal against one of the best front fours in the NFL, and then you add in that linebacking core. A scary situation here. So Aaron Jones is going to be asked to pretty much make something out of nothing multiple times this week. And again, at full strength, this Packers running offense has really struggled against that 49ers defensive unit. So at full strength, with those guys healthy, I'm not too keen on this matchup. I think that there is the potential for an ugly bust performance out of Aaron Jones this week, but being the caliber player he is, having the upside he has to potentially rattle off a big run, I keep him in as a low-end RB1 for this week. And then Saquon Barkley, remaking his appearance in the top 12 running backs group for this week. The matchup is the best he's seen all season. Atlanta will give him the chance to post those high upside numbers. Now, the floor still isn't great. We don't know yet if he's going to be unleashed by this Giants coaching staff, but I'm very confident that this will be his most productive fantasy outing of the season. I'm betting on the talent here. I'm betting that Saquon Barkley will ultimately get back to the player that he was, and I think that the Giants potentially picking up their first win of the season this week can also favor them into having a bit more of a run game late in the football game, which will contribute to Barkley's offensive numbers. Najee Harris now getting into the running back twos. Najee is a very dynamic player. He struggled to find efficient lanes and efficient production here in his first two starts. That's going to be somewhat of an issue again here against the Bengals. 20 carries, 61 yards. That was the output. So literally just a hair over 3 yards per touch for Dalvin Cook and David Montgomery. Both of them had 20 carries for 61 yards against this Bengals front. That's not what I expected to happen this season. I'm not saying the Bengals are an all-out elite run-stopping unit, but that's a heck of a lot better than what I would have expected. I think that this matchup might be a little bit tougher than what it seems like on paper, and you're probably crossing your fingers that Najee either rattles off a big play here or finds the end zone. There's certainly a lot of talent, so there is opportunity to produce here, but I think that this matchup is tougher again than it is at face value, so beware of that. DeAndre Swift. Now, he lingers around here as a high upside RB2 play because of the upside he presents in the receiving game. But man, for such a favorable matchup against a bad run stop last week, him and Javonte Williams were rather disappointing against the Packers, and DeAndre Swift would have had a complete dud of a game if it weren't for absolute garbage time yardage he picked up as a pass catcher late in the fourth quarter. So that kind of shows that he has that level of a floor because he's utilized in that fashion, and Jared Goff doesn't really have another dependable pass catcher outside of TJ Hawkinson, and the running backs are really all he has to go to once teams key in on Hawk and make sure that he can't beat them by himself. So DeAndre Swift against the Baltimore Ravens, I expect another bad game script for the Lions. I expect him to be blown out again in this performance, but that pass catching ability gives him that upside to notch himself in here as a top-end RB2 play. Joe Mixon, a player I'm not all that fond, not all that keen on here this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this Bengals offensive line is going to have some struggles. I think that he is lower on my list this week than he would typically be, and I think that if he doesn't find the end zone here, you're looking at a potentially really ugly performance. The floor for Mixon is very, very shaky and very scary here. Damien Harris against the Saints. This is a run stop that was one of the best in the league just a season ago, and they had a dominant run, but it's not the same football team here. I think that the Patriots are going to ball control this game. They're going to, again, take away Jameis Winston's favorite option. They're going to try and make him do things he's not comfortable with doing, and then they're going to get the ball on offense, and they're going to just run them over with their really, really good offensive line. The Pats have one of the best run-blocking lines in the league this year. I mean, literally watch some of their games. Just cut the tape on what they did against the Dolphins was ridiculous, just pushing players out of the way. Damien Harris is going to come out here, continue to have his steady track of just finding positive yardage and moving the football downfield. And if he finds that finds that end zone, there's a little bit of upside to be had here, even in a tough performance. Again, though, the Saints team is not the same defense they were even a season ago. Antonio Gibson, I had to move him down the list just a little bit. My fear this week is that for as dynamic as a player as Antonio Gibson is, J.D. McKissic has been on the field a lot lately, and the Buffalo Bills, the opponent for this week's matchup, I expect to get out to an early lead, and I expect them to hold that lead for the majority of this game. If they do so, J.D. McKissic will be on the field as a pass catcher. If they force the Washington football team's hand and make them play that area of the game, that's going to be the case. My ideal situation is line J.D. McKissic up in the slot and put Antonio Gibson back there as a pass catcher out of the backfield, but sometimes Ron Rivera's got other things in store, and this offense does some goofy stuff with McKissic as the running backs for sometimes even large parts of series. So I still love Antonio Gibson this season. His upside, his dynamic ability is excellent. I'm just waiting for some matchups when Washington might be the favorite in the game, and they can incorporate a little bit more of a rushing performance for him and then set up that passing game off of that. Tyson Williams here. He's involved in the committee system. I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to keep pointing that out because I think that that's a major reason to sell him right now. Latavius Murray is very much a real threat to his offensive workload, as is Devontae Freeman, who also had some nice plays in that first game he had with the team against the Chiefs. But for now, Tyson is the lead back. Now, he's had some goofy fumbles the past couple of weeks, one in each game, but still the lead player, still has possession of that starting job for now. The Lions got absolutely cooked by Aaron Jones last week. Now, Aaron Jones did have 3 receiving touchdowns, but none of them were like deep wheel routes or these miraculous routes that he just happened to run. They were like jet motion passes and just flipping him the ball and asking him to go out in space and make a defender miss. This Lions defense is not good. They are banged up. They are thin at positions. They need help. Tyson Williams can exploit this team. The Ravens are a bully ball dominant offensive rushing force. Tyson will have a very steady floor in this game. Chase Edmonds against the Jacksonville Jaguars, another team I expect to ball control and just blow their team out of the water here. The Jags aren't going to be able to hang with the Cardinals' pass rush, and their defense is not going to be able to stop Kyler Murray. That's just how it is. Chase Edmonds is going to get out in space, be super efficient, catch passes, maybe even on some inside zone plays or some draws, spring some yardage there. I think the upside is really high this week, and the floor value with Chase Edmonds is better than it is on a normal week-to-week basis. Absolutely someone I'm looking to start here. Javonte Williams. Now he is slowly creeping up and closing the distance between himself and Melvin Gordon. In week 1, I talked about this basically every time I touch on Javonte. It was basically a wash, and then Melvin Gordon comes out and has a 70-yard rushing touchdown. Last week, however, and mind you, they are nearly splitting carries down the middle, even more so than Zeke and Tony Pollard did last week, which seemed to get a lot of people stirred up about that. Javonte Williams came in here and had over twice the rushing yardage output on the exact same amount of carries as Melvin Gordon. So you're talking about throughout the entire course of a game, he was more efficient on an actual per-touch basis. He didn't have an outlier run that jacked his stats up. These were the actual numbers we were getting from him. So Javonte against the Jets this week, I think that Zach Wilson's going to struggle a lot again, throw some picks, have some ugly turnovers. The Broncos should start the season out 3-0. Ball control late, Javonte, and yes, Melvin Gordon will be sprinkled in there as well, and he will probably have a very healthy touch count, which I'm projecting him for, and you'll see that here in just a second. But I think Javonte has the better upside this week, while they both have very, very quality floors. Myles Gaskin. Now, typically, I'm not a big Myles Gaskin fan. This isn't a super high upside player for me, and sometimes his floor isn't even that great. But against the Las Vegas Raiders defense, without your starting quarterback, you're going to have to lean on these running backs. I think that there's a potential here that Myles Gaskin sees an uptick in touches and usage as opposed to what we've seen through the first 2 weeks here. And he's talented. He might get out there and make some really nice plays, have one of his best weeks of the season. This is certainly the matchup to do so. So I think Myles remains a quality RB2 start, especially in PPR formats because of the value he adds as a pass catcher. Elijah Mitchell against the Packers. Now, we need to hear, is he in? Is he out? What's the situation with his health? Because right now, all these 49ers running backs, surprise, surprise, they're banged up. It happens every year. But the Packers are an advantageous matchup if he's out there. He's a good young rookie. He's a sledgehammer on the goal line. He's a pretty big kid. He should have some success and, again, be a low-end RB2 start if he is healthy and gets that go for the 49ers. Kareem Hunt against the Bears, super talented player. Obviously not a starter as Nick Chubb owns that duty for the Cleveland Browns offense. But Kareem Hunt has his passing downs. He still scores touchdowns, and he still has a valuable and vital role in this offense. He'll come out here. He'll do his thing. He's not the most consistent player in the world, especially at the running back position, but the upside is there because he has so much talent that he could make a big play out of nothing. And then lastly here, Melvin Gordon, my lowest end starting running back 2 in those 12-team leagues. Just a touch below Javonte Williams. The gap really isn't that big here between the 20th overall player and 24th. Again, I don't think that maybe Melvin has elite upside and ceiling. And clearly Javonte Williams doesn't have that this week at that number 20 spot, but these are both quality lineup caliber plays against such a bad football team. I expect them to have volume late in this game and to be very productive for the entirety of that performance and let their numbers just run their course. Alrighty, those are my top 24 running backs for Week 3 fantasy football action. If you enjoyed today's video, drop down, give today's episode a like, and click that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and turn that bell on, of course. Well, that would rather do the effect of not missing an episode, because then you'll get yourself a notification whenever we post a new piece of content here, which we are doing on a rapid daily basis for this entire fantasy season, and we'll be having stuff kicking all the way through the off season, so stick around here for that. But we are a long ways out from that. We certainly don't want that time to come anytime soon, because we're trying to help you all win your fantasy chips this season. So thank you all so much for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.